Hey, founders, welcome back to another episode of the Gab Lab. So glad you're here. This is a show that is designed to bring you financial intelligence that won't only just blow your mind, but it's there to help you build your bottom line as well. I'm your show host, Tanya Woods Richardson, and our episode today is being championed by our friends at Community Futures Manitoba. Our guest today is Financially Fierce founder, Ryley Iverson, and this is one episode that you are not going to want to miss. He's going to talk to us about how he took his business from ideation to acquisition in only 6 short years, but how he did this with a stage 3 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma diagnosis thrown in at the very beginning of his startup. Listen, if you want to know how to become financially fierce, but more importantly than that, how to become physically and emotionally fierce in the process, please, please, please do not miss this episode. Looking forward to seeing you over in the lab. Catch you there. All right, Ryley, welcome to the Gab Lab.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Honestly, you and I go way back. I'm embarrassed to talk about the years, but I think it was 2012. Right when we first met?
I think you're right. You had to sit there and listen to some really bad business ideas of mine outside Collective Coffee. I distinctly remember you patiently listening.
Gosh. So when I think about that, Ryley, I have to tell you from when we first met in 2012 to everything that has happened in your life between then and now, it really is an amazing story. And again, I'm so honored that you agreed to do this show with us to share that story with other founders. It's incredible.
Yeah, thanks, for sure.
So that's where we started, where we ended up, and why Ryley's on the show today, everybody. Everybody has a story. Ryley's story in particular, we talked a little bit about in the title of this show. For those of you that are looking at it on the blog, we talk a little bit about a health scare that you had in the middle of all of this. But we also talk about the fact that from where you are to, I think it was last year, or maybe you're in the process of it still, you managed to start a business, one of your first businesses, and you managed to sell it while going through this health scare. So I don't want to say success is always in a successful exit, because everybody defines success as different, but I have to tell you, I am so inspired by your story. You've moved me to just like really figure out what is the game, what is the purpose of doing everything. So thanks again for being here and sharing your story on this. I'm curious, can you share with our audience just a little bit about the business with respect to the industry, the scope, the size? Like what was it that you built?
Yeah, so we built a business in the government technology space, software as a service. And basically what we did is we gathered data on 38,000 municipalities across Canada and the United States. I'm slightly getting ahead of myself. I mean, the way that we saw the problem came about was working in the industry. And we noticed that businesses were looking for information on local economies and governments were expected to produce it. So we went to the government saying, hey, how come there's disparate data? How come the data is out of date? And they said, hey, we need help with this, right? And so without turning that into a whole, like, how did the problem and business come about, I'll make a long story short and just saying that that's where we saw the problem and working in the industry. And little did we know, a few years later, we scaled that across Canada, selling these dashboards to municipalities. We had an opportunity to grow it into the United States. And then towards the end of last year, we had an opportunity to pass the business on to a bigger company that really brought in some very heavy resources to grow it. And we're pretty proud of seeing where the business is going with the new owners. They're bringing a lot of firepower to it. So that was a 6-year journey, and it was a heck of a ride. We were one of the first companies to join Collabs in Saskatoon. It was the first tech incubator in Saskatchewan. I think it was fairly new to raise money at the time. We had the opportunity to go to a tech accelerator in the United States called Techstars. So I feel like we broke a lot of barriers for ourselves and maybe the community around us. And honestly, to this day, looking back, maybe the thing that I'm most proud about is how former team members still call and they say, are you going to do something again? Because we really miss being a part of that team. And I think that was, if you want to, whatever you want to call success, the thrill of maybe selling a company, that fades very fast, but those memories and things like that that carries an impact for sure.
So 6 years. So started in 2014. Did I get the numbers right? Or
15. I think we were like toying with the idea in 14, okay. And we were so slow about it, but I would call it the first sale was in 15. So
okay. And yeah. This is when you say this is you started it with a partner, right? Davie, the two of you kind of.
Yeah, I had a co-founder named Davie Lee, and we were colleagues, and I know that you know Davie as well. So
shout out to Davie.
Yeah.
And yeah, just even to see that process at the very beginning, again, it amazes me and it inspires me to know where you started and where you ended up with everything that happened in the middle of it all. So when you started, I'm hearing that you didn't have an end in mind. Like when you started the business, it was more about finding the opportunity or solving a problem than it was about, we're going to build this type of business in this many years.
I maybe two thoughts there. One would be, I think there was the dream there to sell the business one day. And I think most founders, especially in the tech space, they always want that, I think, to a certain extent, or some don't. They want to go further or keep it forever. I think that intention was there, but I think we were absolutely oblivious to what that would take, or that was even remotely possible. But I think another thing that shouldn't be lost here is we very much, I think both Davie and I had a very heavy sales background, and sometimes there's advice floating around saying, just sell something, just get out there and sell. And I mean, we could go into that one. There's pros and cons to that, but that we really did adopt that mentality of just sell something.
Okay. Fascinating. I love that. I actually want to dive in. I won't dive in now, but one of the things I'm really curious to get your perspective on is the mindset of a tech entrepreneur and this mission of sell it to sell it, right? Like you scale it to sell it. So I'm curious just to get your take on that. But where I want to shift gears a little bit, everybody who's listening in knows that this podcast, yes, it's about entrepreneurship, but we layer in this whole dynamic around finance, the technical and the behavioral piece of it. You've also, what I do want to share with everybody listening is you've done a number of podcasts before. You're not new to podcasts. I'm going to link, if it's okay with you, I'm going to link everybody to these other podcasts because you share a lot of information about the business and just the operations and the logistics of the business. I'm looking to dive in with you today on the financial piece of it, the money mindset piece of it, and some of the challenges and opportunities and lessons and learnings that came out of that. So if you're willing, can you take us back to those early days before the business? And we don't need to go back to 2 or 3, but what do you remember your early relationship with money looking like?
Well, first of all, when we started, I guess you could say, talking again, you asked me a lot of questions that I frankly have never thought about. And so I don't know how much financial counseling you're doing, but I think I need to hire you. I think others need to, because the way that you are getting me to think about money, I was like, wow, I don't think about these things. And so, yeah, I did try to think back, and one of the first memories that come to mind was my parents got me to open a bank account, I think when I was about 12 years old. And so I'm not saying that I was educated on the depths of the stock market per se, but I felt like they did a very good job in attempting to build sort of a foundation there and trying to explain how important money is. Not that it should overrule you, but it's important. So there was the bank account thing that comes up, and then I think maybe within the first year of university or so, my dad really encouraged me to read the book, The Wealthy Barber. And I don't even remember a lot of it to this day. People were getting a haircut and getting financial advice, but it did leave, there it is.
Pulled it out, yep.
That carried an impact. And I did take commerce in school. And so I took some finance classes, and I had the opportunity to take a personal finance class. And I think it's good to have all that theory, but then you have to live it. And that's a very different thing.
Wow. Do you find that when you took finance in university, especially, I didn't know you took the personal finance piece, but did you feel that it was relatable? Like everything that you learned in university, could you then apply it to your real situation?
I heard you talking to Katrina German about this, and like tech mentalities. And I totally forgot that I took a course called entrepreneurial finance, and maybe I just was too immature at the time. But yeah, to answer your question, it would be I brought forward basically zero.
Okay.
Maybe the ability to figure things out or build a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of that was corporate finance. I mean, the personal finance class, yeah, bar none, for sure, that had implications. But I also don't remember the ins and outs of that. I think one thing that you got me thinking about was, and I've thought about this many times over the years, but I think it's sort of inherent in my nature to practice what I like to call financial fasting, and that's going for very, very long periods of not making money. And so I think that's rooted in my ancestors, who totally acknowledge settlers to Canada, right? But they're farmers. And I think cash flow is very cyclical, right, for farmers. And so you spend when you have it. And I think that was sort of, I think that's sort of inherent in my nature. And the same with student life. You're making money in the summer unless you have a job during school. So you have money at that point. That carried over to me in the business. I quit my job 6 months in, and I had no money in my bank account. I think we were like $5,000 in annual recurring revenue, like nothing, which worked out, but could have been very foolish. But yeah, that philosophy's had a big impact on me, for sure. Yeah.
So you're talking about your annual revenue being 5,000
at that time when
beginning.
I quit my job, it was probably,
So, I want to thank you and applaud you for sharing that story on the financial fasting. We've had this discussion, and again, the courage that you have to show up on this show and just really talk about the realness and the rawness and the authenticity of that story. Because in my experience, over 85% of founders are going through this stuff, but nobody's talking about it. And what I find just so inspirational about your story is that despite all of this stuff, despite the legacy and the financial fasting and what you brought into the business, you managed to get out on the other side of it. So thank you for bringing that up. So I'm curious, so you're talking about your dad giving you this book, you're talking about learning, or at least being shown different financial models and what needs to happen. And it can be overwhelming. I know even for me, it's still overwhelming, but basically you've got a pretty strong foundation on, here's things that you need to know. You've got your bank account, you've got your, the books that your dad's sending you, the university experience. But it sounds like at the core of it, there was, I don't want to put words in your mouth. So how did you feel about money at the time when you started the business? Was it scary to you?
It's a hard question to answer.
Yeah,
I think there's,
I know, sorry.
No, don't be. I'm just trying to unpack it in a concise way. Yeah, fear for sure.
Okay.
Fear of, there's the inherent fear of failure, but I think that's less to do with money. I think the fear of going broke. But at the same time, something I've learned is if you get too comfy, then you get complacent. And so sometimes when I'll just say your back's up against the wall, you get that fire, to go and build or acquire those customers, right? And
Yeah.
so, back to the point of the question, fear, an attempt to take a calculated risk, and that means, I think, different things to other people, because man, you hear some pretty incredible stories, like the Airbnb story, and collecting a hockey card full of or a hockey card binder full of credit cards. Like, I just wouldn't do that. I don't have that sort of risk propensity. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, fear for sure. But also recognizing that I was to a certain degree, a fortunate situation where if I failed, I'd get a job and I would start over. I didn't have a mortgage. I didn't have a family. And I'd heard people talking about this, like trying to take this risk when you're, you're not when you don't have others dependent on you, or, the mortgage. So yeah, I'm hoping I'm unpacking that in a concise way. It is a hard one to unpack, but it's certainly not, and probably one that requires some deep meditation.
So how then, Ryley, with I don't want to say fear mindset, but there's this little monkey on your back, right? That's going, don't get dead broke, make sure you have enough money. Where's this all going? I'm curious to know how that mindset then, how did that impact how you built the business? Like what happened? Let's even just start with startup capital. What was that mindset in going in for a raise, or did you even go in for a raise at the very beginning?
No, we bootstrapped for 2.5 years. Both Davie and I come from the small, you could almost say the sole proprietor background. So that mentality wasn't there. And that mentality of like, keep cash in the bank, spend less than you make, the very basics were very much in our head.
Yeah.
I think when we started to get some traction, and there was I'll just say a spark in the tech community in Saskatoon, where we started and grew the business. I think there was some excitement around where the tech community could go. And I think we were just kind of sitting there, and we had bootstrapped and showed some traction. So we did raise. I don't know that we quite understood 100% what that meant at the time. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, it was a positive thing, and an incredible ride. But yeah, the fear was probably there, but I don't know, does it ever go away? Although we had the fear, we had sort of an underdog mentality, and just sort of that sole proprietor more so mindset, until later on in the business, when these incubators and accelerators and mentors were really coaching us to think bigger. Yeah, the fear was there, but somehow I feel like we found a way to overcome it kind of every time. Something that I reflect on a bit, though, is maybe the why. And so something I've been kind of thinking about, you mentioned doing some other podcasts. I always had the business to be behind, if that makes sense. It's easy to put your business in front of you and make that the story. But when you leave your business and you have some time in between what you're doing next, there's no business to kind of hide behind. So you have to ask yourself a lot of questions.
Wow. I find that fascinating, because I know, speaking to many founders, they don't separate themselves from the business. They don't
Yeah.
feel like they're hiding behind a
Hard.
business. They feel that the business is an extension of them, and that they're being weighted or valued based on their personal self is being judged based on the business. Where do you think that this is a tech mindset, that it's tech entrepreneurs that are able to separate the fact that that's the business and this is myself and I'm not being judged as a result of that?
No, I don't think so. I think it depends on the person.
Okay.
I think, yeah, did I embody my business? Absolutely. And to a certain extent, that devoured my life and caused problems in other areas of my life because I was consumed by it and I was obsessed by it. And so that comes natural to me. And so I think it's more of an attempt to peel it away so you can concurrently live other areas of your life while building the business.
Okay.
But I don't think that neither is right nor wrong. It's whatever works for you.
And when you talk about bootstrapping, knowing that you've been a part of incubators in the States, do you feel now that, would you have done it differently knowing what you know now about building business? Do you still think bootstrapping is the way to go? Or was that a mental block?
The answer that helps no one, but the answer is it depends.
Okay.
But to unpack that a bit, I think that we were grappling with two different, I'll just speak for myself, two different people could maybe on a Friday night, that person wanted to just say, this could be a lifestyle business. And then maybe come Monday morning, it's like, oh, I want to take over the world. So I think you really need to be strong in your conviction on which way that you want to go.
Okay.
And I think, yeah, the opportunity to do an accelerator in the United States and just the mentorship from some of the people that have built some of the biggest tech companies on the planet, it really gets you thinking on what it takes to build, a big tech company at scale. And yes, if I was starting again, I would know which way am I going. I'd make that decision before, and that would impact kind of every way I try to grow the business, if that makes sense.
I love that. That's so powerful, Ryley. Knowing where you're going, right? And it's not that you don't necessarily need to reach that, just having that goal in mind. And were you and Davie on the same page with that goal, or did being in the incubator programs kind of bring you together to reach that goal?
I think we always made decisions together. And yes, we were. I think something that, you mentioned at the start of the podcast, and it might be appropriate to mention now, is how health and mental health impacted our decision making. And so, so I was reflecting on this. This is sort of a completely new thought. So the business journey was 6 years. Over that 6 years, 7 people in our immediate family circles, or aunts and uncles, just going out that far, 7 people were diagnosed with cancer, and one was myself. 2 of them died, and I think their story is their story on that, but that was a sideshow. But before we got our first sale, I was diagnosed with stage 3 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. The oncologist basically said, hey, if this grows another centimeter, we recommend that you look into treatment. And this is probably a deeper story for another time, but about 6 or 7 months later, I was getting an ultrasound, and they couldn't find any meaningful amount on me. And effectively, that was when I quit my job. And the thought in that, Tanya, was just basically like, hey, this doctor wants to give me a timeline on my life. Why am I living in this state of fear? Like, we're all going to die. And I really wanted to build that business, right? And so that's why I quit the job and went after it. And fear became a lot smaller to me. But the other thing that needs to be mentioned was, and you know, just something for people to reflect on. And this is, once again, neither right nor wrong, but I've been thinking about this. Were you creating from a place of trauma or your past? Are you creating from a place of passion and like what you really want to build, right? And I think when we combine all of that stuff and everything going on, as much as I use that drive and that fire, at a certain point, there was a lot of emotions to unpack that I wasn't dealing with, and I was just using the business as, I think I needed it, right? I needed it to keep the fire going. But there was a time where I crashed, unfortunately, and my body just said, hey, like, we need to deal with some stuff. We need to take a break. And so, you know, my attempt moving forward, if and when another venture comes about, is to the best that I could start with that clean slate. But you don't know these things, right? And especially when you're building kind of your first venture.
So I'm curious, I want to kind of go back to that comment that you made around you're given this diagnosis and then you quit your job because you knew in that moment of your life being on the line that you wanted to build the business. That's a pretty big statement. What was the passion to build the business? Your life's on the line, and a part of your bucket list is to get this business built. I know it has a beautiful purpose behind it in terms of data and economic development, but is that what the fuel was, or was there something deeper there behind the business that you needed to accomplish?
Yeah, I think humans always want to peg one thing as the root cause of everything. And when someone's going through cancer, they always say, what caused this? And they're looking for that certain thing. And I think like one thing I reflect back on is I like problem solving. So when there's a problem to be solved, and that's just what entrepreneurs do, I want to solve it. I think both my co-founder and I, when we came together, we just said, hey, like, it's on the bucket list. We really want to build a venture and we need to find a problem to solve. So that was sort of sitting there. And I already mentioned kind of, you know, other motivating forces. But I also think there were less positive things in, I'll just share my story, maybe on wanting to prove some people wrong. So again, creating from the past, or that desire for maybe external validation, or you could say status. It's the unfortunate truth. And I really had to work on that. And if that motivates people in the long run and that works for them, that's great. But that wasn't the best for me. And those weren't the only reasons, but those are certain elements in there for sure.
Ryley, that takes a lot of courage to say that, right? Like I find that people, to your point, like when your back is up against the wall and you're forced forward, this is where you do the deep soul searching and you really figure out, you know, why are you here? What's the whole meaning behind it all? And what you just said, it really landed with me. It you know, for the sounding cliche, but the whole goosebump thing, because I really feel, and I know this is a podcast all about numbers and tactical and mechanics, but it's to your point, understanding why you're doing it. And most people, out of human nature, we do things for acceptance. We do things for meaning. Sometimes there's different language around it, like status and belonging, and right. But at the end of that, but what's so powerful about that, Ryley, is that once you know why you're doing something, right, and then you can actually really just start to dissect the meaning of that instead of living blindly. And I think I'm so glad that you've made it through. I know, did you say that you're close to actually being the term of being in remission and cancer free? You're almost there. How does that work?
Yeah, it's an interesting subject. It depends on the doctor. So I was recently told by one of my kind of main doctors that they were really monitoring sort of the 3-year mark, and now we're pushing 6 years.
Okay.
So that was long past, but it wasn't really shared with me. I think I just live cognizant of things could turn, and I try to do the best I can to stay healthy. But dealing with the things that I sort of mentioned and needing to take a break, I've never felt healthier than in my life. And so I think you don't want to live in a state of fear of is this when if will it or when will it come back, or but at the same time, again, don't get too comfy, because a lot of things can happen very fast in life. So
Wow. Okay. All right. So if we go back to the diagnosis then, and then this impetus and this motivation to, okay, if I've got this time and, you know, you knowing that you wanted to build the business, did it change anything in how you now manage the business financially? Did that diagnosis change anything financially for you in the business?
I would say, I talked about the reasons of creation in a good and bad way.
Yeah.
I think, and I think this also comes from, there's a money thing, but also, building your first venture. I'll just use the word impatience.
Okay.
And I think, really good businesses take a long time to build. And I think a lot of people get wrapped up in that story on how they as in just, random stories, they scaled in 5 years and build $1 billion company. And I think that good businesses take a lot of patience. There's other ingredients for this recipe, like a pile of capital, depending on the business, but I think it caused impatience. And I think, there was a lingering need to really unpack a lot of those emotions, and that was fuel for the fire early on, but then it became a distraction. So I'm trying to explain that in the best way, but I hope that kind of makes sense.
Yeah. And I'm curious, did the end line, because you said that your diagnosis came even before sales happened in the business. So you're in this kind of development stage of pulling this technology together. Then you get the diagnosis. I'm curious, with the diagnosis, did the end line for the business, did that become a little bit clearer for you to say, okay, this isn't going to be a lifestyle project. I don't want to be in this 20 years. I want to build the business. I want to get in. I want to get out. Did that happen, or did that happen along the way somewhere?
I don't know.
No. Okay.
I wish I did. I'd have to really sit and reflect on that one. I think when you're building the business for the first time, and I'm not saying that you have an easy roadmap to do it again, but I think it's just easy to have all of these ideas in your head of what this will become or how big it can grow when you haven't done it per se. And I think maybe I'll use the word realistic when you're looking at building another venture and you've kind of done it before. But that my roadmap's unknown to a certain extent. I only grew the business so far, and then I'm back into the world of the unknown.
If I may, though, the fact that you grew it and then we're in a position to sell it, you're part of the 4% out there that can actually get to that point, right? And you did it with the diagnosis that you had. So I'm curious then, overall, what were some of the biggest financial hurdles that either you and Davie experienced together in the business?
Well, bootstrapping was really hard. I came in very, very broke. And we discussed how that was good and bad, but up until we raised our pre-seed round, we weren't really paying ourselves well. And once again, subjective to say whether that's right or wrong. It worked for us at the time.
Okay.
But I think that causes a lot of stress. And I know that when we were taking not even a market salary, but more like enough to pay the bills, I felt like a lot of that stress was relieved. But even, after that, we most certainly never paid ourselves a market salary. So that can cause stress. And I think any business owner, but probably any human, can relate to when you're building a business to a certain extent. If you're not profitable or you're not on your path to growth, time is working against you, right? And sometimes you're looking in the bank account saying like, how's this gonna go, right? And I have heard a lot of stories, and I wouldn't say that we ever had anything sort of too dramatic that way, but that also goes hand in hand with risks, because some people just see this ability to grow really, really fast, so they put all the cash in. And so I wouldn't say that we were necessarily in that scenario, but I think sometimes when your chips are down, you really don't want to look in the bank account. Sometimes you just want to be ignorant.
But I want to ask you, because in one of our other conversations, you talked about you and Davie being really quite cognizant of the levers, the financial levers, and really assessing quite astutely kind of where you were at. And it sounds to me like that's one of the big differences that you and Davie had over many business owners who are looking at just the bank account balance or waiting till 4 months after year end to get the reality of their financial situation. Where did that come from? Was that just always at the very beginning you wanted to understand what your numbers were telling you, or?
Davie had work experience in the finance industry.
Okay.
I guess I did to a certain extent with Futurepreneur. So we were exposed to seeing how businesses ran and coming from family businesses. So we had that in mind, and just some of the things that come to mind. I mean, we did not have our QuickBooks in the first year in order, and that was really bad. So when we hired a bookkeeper, the person was like, "What are you guys doing? Like, get this stuff in order." So we said, "Yeah, I think we can afford paying a bookkeeper here and there," and that was a smart idea. And then we actually hired an office manager, which honestly, like, we were doing founder sales, and so bringing in the office manager was just incredible. We started billing people on time. I don't think we ever missed payroll or ran it late, but we just made sure we were on top of everything. So we tried to surround ourselves with people who just focused on that. But at the same time, we kind of had, we experimented with a few different software programs, but we really always just went back to a Google Sheet that we kind of called the financial Bible. We had a waterfall of, all of our customers and, when would that contract end. So I think we did good, not incredible, not great. And I'm sure you could kick our butts in some boot camps for sure. Just hearing a few things in the way you talk, it's like, yeah, we're so rookie for sure.
No, but you know what? I think that we never get it all together, right? To your point of, does the fear ever go away? We never learn it all. We never get it all figured out. Hopefully we're living our life so that we're always uncomfortable, because I mean, that just shows us that we're growing, right? We just reach different layers, levels all the time. The same thing with financials. But the biggest thing that I hear in your story and Davie's story is that you took the time to look at it. You didn't, even though it might have scared you and there was discomfort in not paying yourself, you weren't afraid to look at the numbers to see what they were actually saying, because that's what it means to be financially fierce, right? Know where you want to go, yes, but definitely know where you're starting from. Otherwise, you're never going to get there. You're never going to get there if you don't know.
I mean, I think another thing worth mentioning that was really eye-opening to us as we started to grow was there's that conflicting advice of just sell something versus, I'll say, unit economics. So off the start, yes, proves that you can sell something, but then as you start to grow, this unit economics thing starts to come in, and for people that don't quite understand, I view it as like the cost to acquire and service one customer, right? And you really need to make sure that you have really figured that out, which is really hard to do when you're just starting out. But those unit economics really need to line up if you're going to scale a venture. And so I don't even think we were aware of what that even meant in the first couple of years of the business. It was literally just get customers in, try not to spend too much money. And then we started to try to learn the systems.
Yeah. You know what? I've got a huge smile on my face when you're talking about this, because it's so true. So I'll give full credit to you on unit economics. I love that whole term. And I was like, what does that mean exactly? What are you referring to? But, when we start talking about numbers and cost of goods, right? And a lot of people just go into, here's the materials and, here's the labor to manufacture that specific product. But when we actually drill down, and to your point, customer acquisition, all of the marketing that goes into that, all of the hand holding, all of the pitches and presentations, and then the retention. How do you get that customer experience, not just to fulfillment, but past fulfillment into the retention piece? Understanding the economics behind that is, in my experience, this is where most businesses are losing their profit, because they haven't done that number. And then they're like, I don't know where our money's going, right? We budgeted for operating, but not for good salary for the owners. But so I love that you brought that up. Sorry, that was a little rabbit trail for me. But
no, I think it's great. And I think you're much more qualified to talk about it than I. It's something on my mind, but I wouldn't say I'm the first person to call about unit economics, but it's something worth mentioning.
I think it's extremely valuable, and you're just as qualified. You've lived it and you've learned it, which is key. So talking about learning now, can we just shift into some of the biggest lessons that you've learned that you want to kind of, share, but also now that you've gone through this first business, what is it that you won't do again? And what is it that you would want to do differently? What were the biggest lessons, the financial lessons?
I think the jury's still out on paying yourself from day one. I don't know what to say about that. I think it depends on whether you can do that or not. I have met many founders or potential founders that are holding themselves back on the illusion that they need to keep that big fat salary. Or maybe they have such a high burn, a personal burn, that they could never make that happen. But I think the jury's still out on that. But I think, and it's something that maybe you've also reiterated or opened my mind to, is just, valuing yourself. And if you're not paying yourself, you're not necessarily valuing yourself, but it depends on how much you want to pour into it. So treat it as not so much an answer or a tip, but something that I'm pondering. And I'm sure others have unpacked better. I think the second thing is the bootstrapping thing. On the whole, I'll take an opinion on this and saying, I think you should bootstrap as long as you can, if you can. Because some people are building such, I'll just say, deep technology that has, say, a 5 or 10-year path to revenue. Or maybe you're in the hardware business that you just need so much capital to pour in. I come from the software world, so it's a bit different from me. And we brought in the right sort of talent pieces of the puzzle to make that happen on a bootstrap basis. So I inherently still go back to bootstrap, because even if you want to raise capital, are you in a better position to say, hey, I need capital to put fuel in the fire because this thing's taking off, versus coming to someone and saying, I have an idea, right? And people could easily debate me on that one. And it depends on where you live and mentalities in different places. But I like to see, I want to try to prove some traction before I throw money on.
So maybe Ryley, maybe just to clarify there for people who are listening, would you be open to considering bootstrapping as the point in which you're invested to ensure that there's like a minimum viable product? I know we're not talking about pharmaceuticals and we're talking about, the vast number of business owners or founders that are listening or watching to this, but being in a position where you can prove the value of your product or service, prove that there's a market, that there's an appetite for it, putting in the skin in the game to get to that point, and then from there finding the capital to say, whether it's equity, whether it's debt, whatever it is, but then finding that capital to say, and this is where I want to take it. This is what I want to build out of this product or service. So
yeah, and again, that's if you can, right?
Okay.
Certain businesses can't, but yes, I agree with your take on that. But and maybe just flipping back for a second, you got to make that decision. I mean, yes and no, but I think to myself, this is just my thinking. Trying to make that decision, maybe almost before I start on, is this like a lifestyle business and, you know, a couple person venture that, you know, provides me a good living, or is this, am I trying to build a rocket ship here that I'm going to have to raise a lot of capital? And sometimes I get asked, like, which way will you go? And I say, well, the answer is it depends on the mission that I'm trying to achieve. It could go either way for me. And so obviously, if you decide that you want to build this rocket ship, that means you're bringing on investors, and you need to understand what that means. And I think that a lot of founders get caught up in the hype of raising money, and I think they lose the meaning behind like what they're really doing. You're not giving away your company to someone. They're injecting money and if you have the right investor, a lot of value into your company, you know, and if you can bring on strategic investors, that can work out incredibly well for you. But you know, vet those people very carefully. We were very, very blessed with investors that treated us incredibly well. But I don't know, sometimes not every business should be funded per se. But if you can kind of figure that one out, which is easier said than done, before you start, which way you're going, which kind of goes back to what you're all about. So that one's turning into a rant. So
no, I love that though, but there is a parallel between the episode with Katrina German, because her language was know if you have a growth mindset or a control mindset. So control is a lifestyle, right? It's just kind of you're on the train track and it's moving along and you get to control all the dynamics. But growth is the rocket ship in your language, where it's like, nope, this is what we're building and we're going to scale this thing and then get out. But what I love about what both of you have said is start with the end in mind. Know what you're building, really, because it will definitely help you with achieving that end goal, right? With clarity on that. And if I can, because I think this is an important piece that you brought up, and in other conversations, you talked about this huge light bulb moment for you when the business actually started paying you this paycheck, where you got paid. You got paid. Like I can feel the elation in the right. So what, like, let's just walk through that. What is that? What did you learn from that?
Yeah, so towards in the later years of the business, and I kind of shared, you know, from my personal standpoint, like I kind of burnt out and I needed to take a break. And my team was incredible about that. They're like, hey, you know, we got this. You take the break that you need. And something kind of reflecting on was just, I was getting a paycheck from my business, but for once I wasn't like killing myself every week working for it. And so that was a very good feeling. And that would probably be I don't want to say control mindset, but more the lifestyle business approach to a certain extent. Because if you're trying to build the rocket ship, it doesn't really work that way. And so I felt like I had just unlocked a very deep secret in saying, you know, it's what's that book that, you know, is so popular in, I think it was like the 90s, like the E-Myth, you know, where they separate the
Michael Gerber, the technician, Yeah, the manager.
The technician and manager, the entrepreneur, right?
Yes.
And when you're in a small business, you have to wear every hat. But you do, the point of that book was to say you want to get to that entrepreneur phase where you're creating, but you're not in the trenches every day. So I got a piece of what that tasted like, and it felt really good.
No doubt.
And so that may or may not be something to look at moving forward, but building things that have a deep, lasting impact, which you can do in lifestyle businesses as well, also, is lingering. So
yeah, no, well, thank you for that, because I think that I think it's an important message. I mean, I have a personal philosophy on this. I think, and for both of us in our work with Futurepreneur as lenders, when a business owner comes in and they want to start a business, not having wrapped their head around, are they building a rocket ship? Is it growth or control mindset? But one of the very first things we do, right, is to understand, what is your personal burn rate? Like, the business needs to be able to pay you what you need to survive at home. Otherwise, there's no business, right? Like it just doesn't work because there's no foundation there. But and this is a whole other episode, so we won't get into this here. But it amazes me, this belief or mindset that entrepreneurship it's a tough job, it's a hard job, that you don't get paid. Like, the vast majority of us go into it with that mindset, right? And I'm just so curious, and I'm so grateful that you had this experience of, wait a minute, I'm getting paid and I'm not putting in 90 hours. And I think that we as entrepreneurs, we can give the world so much more. We can solve so many more problems if we start taking better care of ourselves, right?
Yeah,
and that also means getting paid.
That's such a good point, Tanya. I mean, yes, that's definitely a whole other podcast, but I learned the hard way of what it means to run yourself so deeply into the ground. And I see other founders do it every single day.
Yeah.
And if and when they come to the realization to take better care of themselves, I mean, I don't know, take it from my position. I don't want to see this happen to people. So yes, as important as it is to build businesses and achieve missions, try not to do it at the cost of your own personal health and happiness. That's for sure.
I love that. I think that's an amazing place to kind of end this message, because there's so much power in that. So many entrepreneurs are compromising themselves day in, week in, year in. And I think, if I may, I don't want to trivialize this, but I think that the gift in the health scare, the gift in the diagnosis is, it really just, it gets you to prioritize what really is important. And at the end of the day, it's health, right? Like there's no business if there's no health. And that means financial health, it means physical health, it means mental health. And so again, thank you so much for sharing this whole journey that you've had with money, with the business. Again, it amazes me and it inspires me. Beyond words what they can really convey here, Ryley. The fact where you started, this being your first business, to where you exited, and everything that happened in the middle. And maybe it was everything that happened in the middle that actually got you to the successful exit. I don't know, but I'm so appreciative of your willingness to share that story here today.
Yeah, Tanya, I appreciate you giving me a platform to share. I feel like I've been kind of hiding out in a cave for quite a while.
We all have.
Well, that's a good point. I think also what you're doing, I won't speak for the big picture, but just for myself, like, probably just gave me more questions than answers, but started making me ask like very, very important questions. So thanks for that one.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, what it means to be financially fierce, just the courage to be aware of where you're at, right? Asking those questions. and then to understand where you want to be, and just moving forward one step at a time. And you are that. You're beyond financially fierce. And again, so appreciative of you taking the time to share that story today, Ryley. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. You're too kind.
Yeah. All right, founders. Well, thanks for tuning in for this episode of the Gab Lab. Ryley's contact information will be in the show notes below, and looking forward to seeing you in the next episode, Gab Lab. Until then, stay strong, stay safe, and stay financially fierce. Bye for now, everyone.